So the question is, what does it mean, sympathy kills in that inmate situation? Good question.
Sympathy kills in the way that it was, where it came from is important to understand. We were talking about a group of people who were, let's see, there were 40 inmates. 25 of them were diagnosed as criminally insane, which of course is a no man's land, because what does that tell us? It doesn't tell us anything other than that they're so-called not responsible for their action, which takes away their ability to take responsibility for their action. So it's not a very useful tool. I firmly don't stand in support of that. But the other 15 people that were there were people who were schizophrenics. And so they were experiencing acute psychotic episodes on and off, and they were chronic schizophrenics. And they too had done tremendous acts of violence resulting in death. And their idea across the board was, it's more important for you to tell us what is expected and how to do it right, because we don't know. And if we sucker you in with help me, chances are we're going to start maneuvering you, because we're about one-upmanship. We're about the gameplay of, I have the power and you don't.
They actually were leveling by stating this. This was an amazing leveling event for this entire team.
That was quite a large emergence, and the power inequality is one of the things that is characteristic of sociopathy. It is that there is a decided need for one-upmanship. I've got the control, you don't.
I'm okay, you're not okay.
Okay, I'm okay, you're not okay. And the bottom line with that is that ultimately that leads to, we don't treat, the only thing we have is punishment. Because my punishment is gonna be greater than anything that you can do to me. So it becomes a punishment system. It invokes a punishment response, okay, as opposed to a therapy response, which is, let's solve the problem. Let's solve the problem is a therapeutic response. Let's punish is about a criminal response.
I'd like to be able to share a little bit about another area of criminality that might add a little thought and controversy to the idea of treatment or not. There's research going on now using EMDR, eye movement desensitization and processing, with pedophile perpetrators. And some of the clinical research that's coming out of it is quite remarkable in that of course, what we all know, I mean, if you've done any work with perpetrators, you know that at some point, almost all of them were victims themselves. Always victims of some form of sex abuse themselves. But what's happened is that they have, in the trauma, they have lost the ability to identify with their victim as a whole person. They just see parts of the victim. They just see body parts and so on. But what we find when we process their own trauma with EMDR, we go into their own traumatic memories, and we first process them as a victim first. And it sounds kind of counterintuitive, seeing the criminal as a victim, right? Because we're leaving the punitive model. And we process their own traumatic memory. That going into their own traumatic memory, one of the things we start to see is increasing empathy for their own victims, because they now start to experience them as people who have gone through trauma, because their own sensitivity and their own re-engagement with their own traumatic experience, which prior to that had been completely just dissociated and blocked off. And when they have to go into their own memory of that victimization, they suddenly automatically start to develop empathy for their victims. It's a really interesting thing we're beginning to see. That research is at a very early stage right now. So we're going to be watching that research over time. But again, a difference in a treatment perspective versus a punishment perspective. You know, and believe me, it's not easy to have to face your own victimization. It's not easy, you know, to go back into those memories, you know, of being actually victimized yourself. But that vulnerability that awakens, suddenly they're starting seeing the victim as a whole person instead of just parts, people parts, body parts. Interesting.